pretty good decision from Sarpreet Singh to make the move over to the Bundesliga, where
it'd have been a brave man not to.
Just a hard and fast answer here is wildcard. I love the package of Bundesliga. Like, they do a great job of YouTube content, social media content, very informative. Like, a lot of it's in English, tactics and information. So shout out to the Bundesliga. But hard and fast reply here, is the Bundesliga like the trendiest league in the world?
Ooh, trendiest. Like, that kind of depends on your definition of trendiest, because
like all the cool kids who like football, whether it's the American hipsters or just some football nerd who's an appreciation of the football played. Like, it just feels like Bundesliga, if you're getting into football or if you're a deep football person, it's just the cool thing,
Yeah, it probably is, to be honest. Like, I mean, you'd have some competition with Spain, but I think just the general dominance of Barcelona, Real Madrid over the last 20 years maybe takes some of the shine off that. If you wanted to be an Atletico Madrid fan, maybe that would tick some of those boxes, but at the same time, they're a very gritty kind of defensively minded team. Whereas in Germany, you get a lot of quite, like, I think the German style of play that you see in Bundesliga, and I've watched quite a bit of it over the last few weeks because it's been the bulk of the football that has existed over that time. Like, it is really a modern style of play. You get a lot of high pressing, a lot of energy, quick pace, sharp passing, a lot of 1-2 touch stuff as well. Like, lots of movement around. Particularly if you watch Bayern and Dortmund, like a little bit as well with a team like Bayer Leverkusen. I think maybe and RB Leipzig as well. Both those two teams are sort of like begging to be taken seriously in that same category as well. But yeah, in particular, like Dortmund and Bayern are just on a level beyond, and Bayern have proven over the last month or two that they are themselves on a level beyond Dortmund as well, because they've just absolutely, like, it looked like there was going to be a title race when they came back, but Bayern just cruised. They haven't lost a game this year. Like, they haven't. They've won every single game since the restart came back. They actually, in competitive football, they haven't lost a game since Sarpreet Singh made his debut for the team back in December, which is insane to think about. And also a little bit of, like, perspective when you look at the fact that Singh has been on the bench 5 times in a row now without getting off the bench at any point to partake in any of these games. Well, you look at a team that's won 22 out of 23 games and it was a draw the other one, and like on their current run of form, like, that's a pretty tough team to break into. And yeah, like, they're technically pretty supreme probably in Germany. It's what lets it down compared to some of the, like, the thing that the Premier League has above every other league in Europe is that it does have the high quality at the top, but it also has, like, the lower teams just more competitive. There's more money, which means those teams, like, fighting for relegation in the Premier League are outbuying mid-table German or Spanish teams. The models in Spain in particular, the model of how the broadcasting money's distributed, isn't particularly fair. They just give it to the teams that people watch the most, and then they watch them the most because they're the best, which means all the money filters through to Real Madrid and Barcelona some more, and the rich get richer. Italy is not the trendiest tactical league, so that you probably, I mean, Ronaldo turning up there helps them a little bit, but yeah, I think in terms of trendiness, you probably would lean towards Germany. It's probably kind of comfortable with difference now that I think about it.
Rightio, you went full circle there. You broke down Sarpreet, and then you swung,
I brought it back around.
You swung it back around. For the folks listening, that's not hard and fast, but it's good enough. The old mate Sarpreet wildcard. How do you? So if you're a footballing nerd or just a football person, you're going to be like understanding the situation here with Sarpreet Singh. You're going to be, a factor is going to be Bayern Munich's one of the biggest and best clubs in the world. And Sarpreet Singh, little dude who once played for Papatoa United, going from the Wellington Phoenix, little Kiwi kid. He's with Bayern Munich. It doesn't really matter how much he contributed. The fact that he's there, the fact that he is won a Bundesliga with Bayern Munich. That is epic. That is undeniable. That is crazy. For the more casual Kiwi sports fan, they might still have that appreciation, but they're not going to necessarily... I don't think they'll give it the same credit because, I mean, Sarpreet Singh's barely played. But as you said, like just being able to crack the bench, like it's a weird... Because I'm reading your Flying Kiwis thing here, and it's like there's different levels of measurement here, because you're not necessarily saying like Sarpreet Singh played this amount of minutes, Sarpreet Singh had this amount of touches, Sarpreet Singh did this and that playing. It's instead like Sarpreet Singh had X amount of bench appearances. He made the bench on this many games. So it's a bit of a mindfuck, because it is a different way of thinking about appreciating a sportsman or a sportswoman, if you catch my drift there. Like, we're not dealing with watching Sarpreet Singh play in the Bundesliga. It's epic because Sarpreet Singh made the bench for the Bundesliga champions this many times, and that's ridiculous. Do you get my vibe there?
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of contextual appreciation that it requires, like
yeah.
It's not it's not like talking about Abby Erceg winning league titles in America, and just like she's captaining her team, she's playing every single minute, she's leading them, and all the like major defensive stats, she's getting named teams of the season every year kind of thing. It's a very different kind of situation, but also that's because Sarpreet Singh's on the other side of his career too, where he's like, because that's the crazy thing to keep in like, of all of the context around this, the main thing, like we could talk about the merits of being awarded a winner's medal, which apparently he will be, for playing one game and 8 total minutes of a game which they won 6-1. Like, it's a late sub. Earning you a medal for that, sure, okay. I don't think that would meet the requirements in the Premier League. I'm pretty sure you got to get 5 games in there. Although they do have dispensations, like you can. Usually they do that for players who have been injured and would have played the games but were not able to for whatever reason, or for reserve goalkeepers because they're an important part of the squad who barely ever get to play. So it's got to be the weirdest job in the world to be a reserve goalkeeper at a top club who has, like, for example, Manuel Neuer there, like, who's just re-signed as well. So whoever there's Sven Ulreich is the backup keeper for Bayern Munich. So he might want to leave if he wants to actually play football. But often those reserve keepers end up as sort of like kind of half player, half coach kind of roles, which is it's actually kind of a cool thing to do because you get that experienced dude, and then there's always a couple youngsters coming through, and you end up doing a lot of coaching as well with that kind of role. The plight of the reserve goalkeeper is always a strange one for that reason. But like for Sarpreet Singh, just getting signed was the major, like, we could look at this in terms of like dominoes falling, like one falls and the next falls and the next falls, kind of thing, or like the progress along his pathway. But I think like the major factor is that as long as the first one falls, the other ones are going to keep falling until someone does something to disrupt it, kind of thing. So it's a little bit of inevitability if you look at it from that point of view. I try to look at it from like, it's just that I'm mixing my metaphors now because this metaphor works on one point of view but it doesn't work on the other point of view. Like the point of view that just getting the ball rolling in that way from getting that transfer in the first place, like the hard work was done to get to that point. But then at the same time, and then like that's why he's in this situation now. But then at the same time, once you get there, you don't get anything for free. And we've seen that where like he was only signed to a reserve contract in the first place. He's expected to be part of the reserve team, 3-year deals. So they wanted to, I guess you think of that in terms of a progression. First year, just play for the reserves the whole time, do as well as you can. Second year, maybe you get to a few subs appearances. Third year, you're hoping to be pushing through for that first team. And then at the end of that, you either re-sign because you see the way through, or you go somewhere else because you've developed nicely, but you need first team football, kind of thing. Like he's already, after 1 year, pushing through that first team. Like he got onto that preseason tour. He wasn't expected to be even part of the first team training system at that point. He ended up going to preseason with them to like LA or wherever it was, playing against teams like Tottenham, and I think they might have played in Germany, for it. They might have done a couple different preseason things. I forget now. It's so bloody long ago. So much has happened in the world since then. But like, at first they were short on players. He got on the bench after doing well in preseason, got on the bench for their Super Cup game, got on the bench for their first league game, for their first cup game. Then the transfer window came. They signed Coutinho. They signed Ivan Perisic. He's pushed back in the order, goes back down to the reserves, where he's then like their best player for the next 6 months or whatever, rewarded in mid-December when the coach gets sacked and the new one comes in. Hansi Flick calls him and a couple other guys up to train full-time with the first team. He then gets on the bench for a few games just before the winter break. He gets on the field, makes his debut in one of those games. Then, obviously, the winter break, goes off, does some training stuff with the team, he had a little bit of a disjointed time through the second half with the reserves because, and the reserve stuff's still going, so he might still get some more games there, I don't know, but like he had a red card that was a dodgy looking red card. That meant he was suspended for the first couple games back, and then he played off the bench once or twice there after that. So, but then there was a big old pandemic which slowed everyone down. But now coming back out of that, like there are a few injuries, which is why he's being considered in these squads. But like he's been on the bench 5 times in a row for them. He hasn't got to play those games, but the fact he's been on his longest run of first team match day squad appearances, it just continues on a progression of like at every opportunity, Sarpreet Singh seems to make that step forward rather than, because you can't even, like, it's so competitive at a club like Bayern. They've got so many good players and it's so few opportunities. You just gotta, like, you can't even afford to plateau. Like, you can't afford to take a sideways step. You have to keep pushing your case forward at every opportunity. And it seems so far through his first season that he's done that. Whether that's translated into actual appearances or not isn't the important thing. The important thing is to see that the progress behind the scenes is being made, because those actual like first team appearances, there's just too much outside of his control going on. You don't know if who's going to be signed in the next transfer window, who might leave, who's going to be injured or suspended at any point. These things are all things that he has no say over. Whether the coach is just in a mood to give a young player a go, whether the game's going to be in the right situation to even allow that. Like, all these things have nothing to do with him. He's just got to stay ready and just, like, be there, available when the time comes. And the time will come eventually if you keep on doing those things. But if you slack off, if you fall back, someone else steps up, takes your place, you're further down the pecking order, you know? Like, it's just a matter of, at every one of those little, crossroad kind of ventures, he's just got to make sure he does the positive, proactive thing. And to date, it seems like he has done.
How would you describe and explain Sarpreet Singh as a player from what you've seen? Maybe go back to the Phoenix as well to provide the context around what he's doing with Bayern Munich when you have seen him play for the reserves team, or whatever appearances you've seen from him during his tenure with Bayern Munich. And so just describe Sarpreet Singh as a player, as a prospect, what he does well, where he tends to play, just the basics. And then what does that mean for the All Whites? Like, would Sarpreet Singh have a similar role with the All Whites, or is he going to be used from what you've seen of the All Whites in a slightly different capacity for the All Whites? How does his role and skills translate from the Bayern Munich system and club to the All Whites representing Aotearoa as part of the golden generation?
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting question, because what we saw from him at the Phoenix was generally you want him as a central attacking midfield kind of playmaker. And his game was still pretty raw at the Phoenix. I expect if you chucked him in there now, he'd look quite a different player just from the level he's been training at over the last 12 months. So, I think his game is really well suited to all those things we're talking about, like the modernity of the German game, like that kind of stuff. It is quite technical. He's a good technical player, and he'll be getting much better in those areas as well. He's not the fastest or the strongest, certainly not the strongest, but he's quite smart and instinctive, and he moves well, and he can make clever late runs into the penalty area, but in particular his passing is very proactive and creative, and those kind of things will hopefully be developing even further to make sure like he's not just, when you get better players around you making better runs as well, that also helps to unlock those kind of abilities too. So there's a lot of ways in which that is helped, but it's his, like as a player on the outside looking in for the Bayern first team, you've kind of you can't really be a specialist. Like you got to be able to play in wherever you're needed. And when he was playing for the team in preseason, he was chucked in at probably the easiest position to work a youth player in, which was, I think, out on the left wing. And that's still probably the position. Bayern tend to play sort of a 4-2-3-1 kind of shape. So that is an area where if you were, and they've got a rotation of wingers, guys like Gnabry and Coman and Perisic while he's there. Coutinho is unlikely to play for them again. I think his loan deal is going to run down, and they're not too bothered about that. They might keep him around just to have the numbers for the Champions League, but don't think he'll be re-signed into next season. But they'll probably sign someone like Leroy Sané instead. So because that's the thing, is that's a position he has played for the reserves, but generally for the reserves you see him more in that role that he played for the Phoenix, which is that central attacking kind of playmaker, or you see him playing a little deeper as a midfielder, which I don't think they'd really look at him doing in the Bundesliga. Certainly not yet anyway. Maybe if he gets a bit older and bulks up a bit more. I mean, if you look at the dude like Leon Goretzka who's playing there at the moment, Leon Goretzka is pretty ripped. So like, I don't think Sarpreet could take him in an arm wrestle, and I think they quite like that physical presence there. Being the bullying kind of team that Bayern are, more on a psychological level than a physical level. But you still want a dude who can enforce the play a little bit more. And yeah, for the All Whites, I think you'd probably see him in that role, which is his best role, because he suddenly goes from being a guy trying to push into a team to being like one of the key players in a team. So Danny Hay seems to quite like the old 4-3-3. I think that would probably, if you set a team up from that shape where you have like Joe Bell as the sort of holding kind of midfielder, Ryan Thomas as the playmaking midfielder next to him, and then Sarpreet Singh as an attacking midfielder in front of them, you've probably got a pretty useful trio there. All players who are, how old is Ryan Thomas now? Probably about 26 or something like that. Maybe not even that old. But all guys who at the oldest are in their mid-20s. Joe Bell's only about 20 now, 21 probably. Sarpreet Singh is 21 exactly. I know that for sure because I was writing about him yesterday. So, I mean, there's your midfield going forward for the next 2 World Cup cycles if you want, and it's borderline the best midfield New Zealand, like the best midfield trio New Zealand would ever have been able to put out there. Or just throw that one out there. Certainly, like at this stage of their careers, if they go on to develop at the pace that they currently are, then for sure. I mean, you got a player there who's playing like top flight in Norway, and he's like a few months into his first professional contract, excluding the pandemic stuff. You got Ryan Thomas, who's playing for PSV Eindhoven, like multiple, one of the most like dynastic teams in Holland, and then you've got a guy at Bayern Munich who are borderline the best team in Europe right now. Like that's unprecedented as far as New Zealand football goes.
Ooh-wee. I'll ask you for any extra nugget or any extra information or insight that you want to add on top of all of that. But I'll do so with a little caveat that you talk about this, the cosmic alignment before any bits of extra. Like what's this cosmic alignment of Kiwi football and German football that you've sussed out with a little bit of sap?
Yeah, mate. I was going to come around to this even if you didn't trigger it. So Sarpreet Singh wins the Bundesliga title with Bayern Munich. He's the second New Zealander to play in the Bundesliga, the second New Zealander to win a Bundesliga title as well, because Winton Rufer back in the day played for Werder Bremen. He won the Bundesliga in 1992-93. Very different circumstances in terms of playing. Sarpreet Singh played 8 minutes, whereas Winton Rufer played all but 2 games and scored 17 goals. He was his club's top goal scorer and one of their absolute top players. So slightly different factors there. Also completely different times of their career as well. So, keep that in mind. But who did Bayern Munich beat to win that title was Werder Bremen, Vincent Rufer's old club. Who did Vincent Rufer's old club, Werder Bremen, finish 1 point ahead of to win his Bundesliga title? It was Bayern Munich back in the early 90s. Who did Sarpreet Singh make his club club debut for the senior team back in December? It was Werder Bremen in the reverse fixture when they played them earlier in the campaign. Where did Sarpreet Singh come up playing a lot of his football anyway? It was under the tutelage of a certain Vincent Rufer through his academy, through the Winners Academy, and also through their connections with Onehunga Sports. So a little bit of just a whole lot of ways in which the history of Vincent Rufer playing in the Bundesliga, and then the future and the present of Sarpreet Singh playing in that same league, just seem to, everything's connected in that way,
It is, in the most beautifully divine way.